Boom.
Hello,
I
everybody.
like that intro. That was great.
Hey, listen, man, we're not fooling around. We may pretend to be professional broadcasters, but we're trying to do it at the highest quality level that we can. Yeah, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It looks like Matt is the host of the show. What are we doing now?
Sorry about that. Sorry,
you can share all your secrets on your desktop if you're not careful there.
That's awesome. You gotta watch that. So I've known Matt Bellis for a long time. Matt Bellis runs a website and a Facebook group called Reopen PA. We'll get to that in just a second. My name is Judah Hoover. I'm with Slate House Group Property Management, and this is Josh Weidman with Central PA, Hard Money Bankers of Central PA.
Yeah, Hard Money Bankers, yep.
We come to you guys every day here at noon, and our focus of the Build and Grow Real Estate Show on the Real Estate Hackers Network is to connect local real estate investors, local realtors to knowledge and content about what's going on, and also latest news about what's happening. We try to keep these shows to half an hour. We spend the first 5 to 10 minutes of every show Monday through Wednesday on the news, and then we get into content. Thursday we have a guest. Friday we do a full news wrap up. So we're gonna go short on news today, but there are a couple of things about news that we need to talk about. First and foremost, CPI numbers are out, which is consumer pricing index. Consumer pricing index. That's the average cost of everything, from milk, bread, eggs, clothing, gasoline, houses. Actually, I'm not sure houses. Anyway, so that might be in the durable goods. And the point is the price of everything that you buy. What is it? Inflation would be when those numbers go up. Hyperinflation is when they go up way too much. The Fed tracks this number, and right now on a year-over-year basis, it shrunk at a rate of like 0.8 and 0.4 the last 2 months. Last month it was down 0.1. Why this is significant and important is because it means we're nowhere close to inflation. I'm not saying I like government intervention. I'm not saying I like, the government, printing money or doing all these other things. Don't get me wrong. I'm a strong dollar guy. I'm very hawkish on monetary policy. However, the part of the reason why I like the Fed to get involved is because inflation is a much easier animal to control than deflation. And we've seen three, and we won't bore everybody with why that is, but economically speaking, we are an economy that has seen 3 months of slight deflation. And if that continues or expands, we have way bigger problems than hyperinflation is.
Well, you want to jump in here, Matt? Or if you don't have anything to say, I want to fight Judah on this point.
No, honestly, as a guy who follows economics from a more libertarian perspective, and definitely looking at it from a capitalistic standpoint, the main issue is that we haven't been holding or adding any value into the economy for the past 3 months. And that's the big portion that a lot of people tend to miss when it comes to monetary policy, is that real value has not been added. And when I say real value, frankly, all value is perceived value. But still, that's the main issue when it comes to this type of intrusion into the economy. We had basically what I would consider a input into the economy that was very artificial in terms of locking things down. That stopped real value being added to the economy, which then starts that whole snowball effect that you were talking about, Judah.
Deflationary, yeah. So I think that the government can prop it up short term by printing money, but eventually we need to get back to actually producing things and actually making things.
And I think that if you watch the housing prices right now, with everything else that's going on, I think that we're in a spot, like, to tie this into housing, since we're supposed to be talking investment property, But the bottom line is, I think that even though we might not be seeing like major inflation and like on a consumer price index side, we're looking at deflation. I think asset values are going up. I mean, look at the stock market and look at property values. The only thing that really I think it can explain this is trillions of dollars being pumped into the economy, and
Right.
a lot of that is going into assets, even though the innate value of that asset might be going down. The prices are going up.
So here's here's the other news story that I just want to touch on right now, because I've long been a fan of distrust of the government, and so a lot of these economic indicators are really just government numbers. So the government's read on how the government's doing, I always take with a grain of salt, and there's other ways of doing that. So one of the most famous that Alan Greenspan used to talk about was the men's underwear index, because you can tell when an economy is coming out of recession, because men put off buying underwear during difficult economic times, and then as soon as things start to turn around, dude, I'm telling you, man, look it up. Alan Greenspan.
I'm not saying you're
noted economist.
I'm
Alan
not saying you're
Greenspan.
wrong. That's just a great interaction. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So there's all these other things that can be used to judge an economy. Right now, TSA releases what their numbers are, and those numbers are up month over month, but year over year they're 17% of where they were. So we're getting better, but we're still in a whole heap of trouble. The other thing, though, that tells me how rapidly we might be increasing and improving the economy is something that just started tracking. These stock pickers and economists have to find something else other than government data to use. So they're looking at dentist offices, because dentists are a pretty stable business, and nothing has affected dentists other right hand up to God. So nothing happened to dentists by and large other than COVID. So 99% of dentists laid off all their staff 3 months ago. Last month, actually, it was 45% laid off 100% of their staff, and as of 2 weeks ago, 77% have hired back 100% of their staff.
It's pretty tough to clean teeth with a robot.
Well, number one, it's pretty tough to clean teeth with a robot. They're also not hiring back. That 77% have hired back 100% of their staff. There's obviously more that have hired back 25, 30, 50, 80% of their staff. So when you look at indicators like that, that's very positive. But the Fed, this is last news thing we're going to say before we get into Matt Bellis here. The Fed has said, because they just wrapped up their 2-day meeting yesterday, and they said they're not planning on raising rates through 2022. As of right now, they are not. Now, obviously, anything can change, and the Fed meets like 6 times a year, 8 times a year, something like that. It's not quite monthly. It's not quite quarterly. I forget when they meet. And they can always emergency, raise or lower rates like they did, back kicking this whole thing off when they cut them to 0%. But the Fed right now is saying our best guess on the economy is that we are not raising rates until 2022. So I think that what that means is through 2022, excuse me. So I think what that means is we're going to see a lot of positive recovery, but it's going to take us a while till we are recovered.
It's very interesting that you bring a lot of that up, Judah. Primarily, the thing that I'm thinking about is the fact that if ever we are in a recession, this is primarily driven by artificial measures. You don't usually lock down an economy in individual states. And so you're having to go outside of the usual standpoints to really understand what the economy is doing. What you were talking about with dentists is really fascinating. Have you seen any other correlating numbers as it pertains to other, I would say, hygiene services industry?
No, but I mean, just because I'm not, again, this is off of an aggregator, and if you were interested in tracking that thing, the bottom line is you could look at what are Cintas's or Aramark's or other laundry services income like, what are their earning reports and things like that. So you could look at, the bottom line is the unemployment chart. You know what I mean? It goes like this, and then it goes like this, and then it goes like this. That's too sporadic to actually make predictions off of and actually say what we're looking at. So you start moving other things in.
Do you realize what you just said? I just want to make sure. Do you understand what you just said? That things were just too sporadic. And let me just ask you, a market never likes sporadic. They like very even, understandable numbers. And so the quicker we can get back to normal, I would say the better. But
I completely agree with you. And by the way, I agree that this is not we've said on this show, the closest to political I get on this show is I say, this is not a depression. This is not a recession. This is a suppression. We are in the midst of a suppression.
Ooh, that was good.
Is that
that's worth the price of admission right there. I tell you what.
You got to trademark that, baby.
Dude, no. I can't.
Seriously.
I mean, so here's the problem. My brother Jason is watching, and he'll chime in. That he's the one who just loved that. I guarantee you. And he will tell us where that is. So before I introduce Bellis, Josh, do you have anything else? Comments?
Yeah. There's a big piece of news here that look. Last Friday we talked about the job numbers.
Yep.
And about they didn't add up. It was like, okay, so long-term unemployment went up, but we increased the number of jobs. What the heck is going on here? Well, it turns out the people taking the survey miscategorized a large percentage of the people that were returning to work, or the unemployed, people that were furloughed from their jobs but not fired. So essentially, they're not working; they're unemployed. They weren't categorized as unemployed. And so even though the unemployment rate dropped, the actual number of unemployed, we're at like 20% unemployment right now across the country.
That's crazy.
Wow. It's not a good thing. And this, Reopen PA, I think has been an eye-opener for a lot of people. I mean, this is a good segue to talk about what you're doing here. I think it's pretty noble and pretty amazing what you've been able to accomplish in a pretty short period of time.
How many likes, how many followers do you have now, Matt, on your Reopen PA group?
It's 106,000 members on I would say a private Facebook group, which is frankly almost impossible to do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I love marketing and everything like that. So I also love that you guys have not been, I certainly, tend to be more conservative, as anybody who knows me know. But I love that you guys have kind of, and you even more so than me, taking the libertarian standpoint and a lot of other people in there. But I will say that your group has been professional, organized, not rabid. I think that you have certainly taken a position that we don't necessarily advocate here on the show. We try to, I understand, both sides of this coin and everything like that. You've certainly taken a position, but I think that you've done a professional and respectable job in staking out and holding that position. So there's been some recent changes to laws, Matt, and I wanted you to come on, and I have a pretty big BS detector. I mean, I scroll past and see memes all the time. And, my favorite right now that's going around is like Donald Trump, love him or hate him. I'm not telling you whether to love him or hate him, but he did not say in 1985 that if he ran for president, he would run as a Republican because Republicans are idiots and you can get them to believe anything. Like the meme, a fake quote that's out there. And like, there's all kinds of those about gardening, about just anything that I see. And it's so obvious to tell what's BS. I'm in the real estate world, and I can't keep up on the housing news of what the Pennsylvania House is doing. So I thought, Matt Bellis, my good friend. By the way, Matt, how long do I know you from high school, or do I just know you because we got into real estate at the same time? How I
didn't go to high school here. You kidding me?
I've known you for like 2 decades. I forget how long I've known you.
No, you've known me for over a decade. I think it was in 2007 that I met you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So coming up on a decade and a half, we'll call it.
Decade and a half, yes.
Right,
if by the time we met there was a child born, he'd already gone through puberty. So
I'm not sure I like the implication
Tell me more about
of two guys talking about that, but great, Matt.
Oh my.
I appreciate it. So,
Yeah.
so Matt, so you are, you kind of run this group, Reopen PA, which has a monster, massive reach. Everybody's talking about what the House passed on Tuesday or Wednesday night, whatever it was, Monday, Tuesday night,
Yeah.
means that basically, I mean, I hear everything from the governor's been impeached and about ready to be thrown in jail to there was nothing that happened and nothing went on. But I believe the middle ground is Pennsylvania Senate and House, Republicans and Democrats have basically passed a repudiation of meaning a denunciation, a slap on the wrist, hey, shut the hell up, Tom Wolf, and let's get about our lives. And even Democrats joined them in that. But but does that mean anything? Or does he have to sign it, or doesn't he have to sign it? Tell me, because I don't even know. So I want to know what it means, and I want everyone else to pay attention to.
Okay.
Is that a good enough setup and question?
Yeah, no, that was great. And I think it would probably be best served to everybody to understand the historical context of, frankly, how we got here. Because if we don't at least have a basis of understanding why we're in the situation that we're in, we're not going to understand how to get out of it, basically. Yeah. So back in March 6th, I believe it was, Governor Tom Wolf, he declared an emergency. Under a law within Pennsylvania, there is the emergency declaration, I think it's act or however they call it. But under there, it says that the governor can call an emergency. Now, this was a law that was put in place for disaster relief within specific areas to rally resources to an area.
Flooding, snow removal,
exactly.
This kind of thing. Hey, there's an emergency going on, so we're going to suspend some of the normal government constraints so that we can spend extra money on salt and snow removal and shipping food in or out or doing other things like that. Totally get it. I'm a small government guy, danger. And I completely agree with emergency declarations.
Yeah. So he claimed that emergency declaration, which states that the governor has 90 days for this emergency declaration. Now, that 90 days, I think, frankly, in 1972, whenever it was developed, was just kind of, frankly, pulled out of the air just to say, yeah, 90 days sound good. Yeah, does that sound good? Nobody can do anything wrong with that. Great. Sure. Why not? And what we have found is that whenever Governor Wolf actually declared this emergency in that 90-day period, he said the entire state of Pennsylvania is a disaster area and we need to do things to shut it down. Basically, if I can put a very crude term on it, the man crowned himself king of all of Pennsylvania. So it was something that a lot of legislators looked at and said, well, that's not right. That's not good. Everybody was kind of just saying, okay, let's just see how this plays out, because if things start turning sour, we might need to speak up. Well, come about a few months later, about April 13th, or I should say a month later, nobody was really talking about reopening at that point. And so we started our Facebook group. We started talking to other legislators to say, hey, what's actually going on here? How are we going to reopen? And I heard from specific House and Senate legislators that the governor has taken on these powers himself. He has not worked with the General Assembly, the legislature of the Pennsylvania House and Senate, and has made these decisions draconianly on his own. And so a couple of legislators, Representative Russ Diamond out of Lebanon, Senator Doug Mastriano out of Adams County, both kind of came up with their own pieces of legislation, HR 836 and SR 323, to just basically say we need to end the disaster declaration. We need to reverse a lot of the decisions that the governor has made, and we need to work with the General Assembly and the executive branch to come up with a rephased opening that would actually work with everyone. So that's what happened this actual week. Finally, those bills were taken on. It was after the 90 days. June 4th was the 90-day period in which Governor Wolf actually had to give up those emergency powers. Well, they passed those things to say, yes, Governor Wolf, it's now time. We're as the General Assembly going to end this disaster declaration. And the General Assembly was citing the very law that Governor Tom Wolf cited whenever he declared those disaster declarations, because it says within that law, the General Assembly can revoke that declaration at any time.
Does
And
he
it
need
doesn't.
to stop? Is it the General
Yeah.
Assembly then signed by the governor? And is it a majority, or does it need to be a super majority or a veto-proof majority or anything like that? Or is it just a simple majority of the General Assembly?
Simple majority of the General Assembly can say, no, we're not going to allow this disaster declaration to go on any further. And they don't even have to send it to the governor's desk for him to sign it. He just needs to recognize that happened.
So what you're telling me is that the General Assembly could have saved us 2 months ago?
Well,
that's a question of how much you want to enjoy the gratitude and the good pleasure of your representatives and senators in your local areas.
Yeah.
Right.
So for us, that would be Scott Martin and Representative Greiner. But that is I don't want to say that the General Assembly was playing politics with the governor, because frankly, the political tenor of the day was very hostile and trying to figure out where we go, how we go. And frankly, we're still dealing with COVID-19. So how do you deal with a disease like that and try to remove the power of the governor? So a very sticky situation. I think it's a very simple answer, but it's really hard to get done, unfortunately, politically. So yeah.
Well, and I think also you take 2 months out of this, we're in a totally different environment. I mean, it's a totally different situation. People still, I think people were ready to get out of their house a month into this thing, but I think there were a lot.
2 weeks it was supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, for the first 2 weeks, I think everybody went into this and said, a lot of people went into this and said, you know what, this could be really terrible. Let's see how this plays out. Right. And I don't fault any of our political leadership for giving these rights to the governor. I think it was probably the smart thing to do at the time. But the longer this goes on, I mean, what's remarkable about this is I've talked to quite a few friends and colleagues who are on the other side of the argument, and they're saying, well, forcing a shutdown of this, of the stay-at-home orders and forcing the hand of the governor, he's got to sign off on this bill. And what's remarkable to me is, if that's the case, what we're saying is it only takes a simple majority to give all of the rights and unlimited power to the governor, but it takes 2/3 to take it back. That's insane.
No. It didn't even take it didn't take a simple majority to give the powers to the governor. The governor gave it to himself. The General Assembly was not a part of this at all.
Oh, the
governor just declared the emergency because the law was already passed, and it did only take a simple majority to end the declaration. All right, so here's my question to you, Matt. So, I'm a conservative. I believe in freedom of association and things like that, and so I absolutely support shop owners' rights to say no shoes, no shirt, no service. I also support their right to say, no open carry in here. Totally get that. I do support their right to say you have to wear a mask in here. Yeah. I get that. That's free enterprise. That's what that's all about. However, as it stands right now, since this has been ended, is any of that mandated anymore? Is any of that legally required? Is any of that is all that going away now? Are we basically in a situation right now where the only impositions on us are those we decide to take on ourselves, and we decide to follow by our feet and our dollars by which stores we patronize?
Gotcha. Because here's the thing: those mask orders, or what was actually said by the governor, are not law. I was actually talking to a friend who was in a Target over in Philly the other day, where she was harassed by somebody saying, "Well, you've got to wear a mask if you're going to be in here." And she said, "No." Well, she played the little bit of a Karen, frankly, to say, "No, let me speak to the manager. Let me show me the law in which I need to wear this mask if that is the requirement." And they said, "Well, there really is no law. We don't have an order from the governor or the General Assembly to say you have to do this. So you don't have to do this." She said, "So I'm going to go into this store without a mask on, and I'm not going to be harassed anymore. Is that okay?" "Yes, that's okay." And then she went on. Because none of the mask orders were laws. The governor did not have the right to enforce a law. The same reason is, if anybody is cited for any kind of fines or licensure revocation because of the fact that they wanted to open up during this time, it is unenforceable because it was never a law. And we are a nation of laws, and we are a state of laws. So, Taste of Sicily over in Lebanon, Round the Clock Diner over in York, they receive fines. They are, of course, going to fight it, but it won't stand because those things weren't laws. So we have a situation where we have one person acting as a dictator who wants to tell everybody what they should and should not do. But in the end, we are a nation of laws, and the power resides within the people. So those things are not enforceable, and they can try to fine you. But I say, frankly, at this point, fight it, because if I'm reading the tea leaves right, we're going to win.
So let me talk to you about this, just because you obviously talk to these people. I am a small government guy. I am a conservative, but I do like the fact that the government has emergency power declarations.
I think that's the fourth time you let everybody know that you're conservative.
I try. I mean, I try not to hide it, but I also try not to trumpet it. But I'm also not necessarily opposed to the government having emergency power rules. So we've seen the government, unfortunately, politicize the IRS. We've seen the government politicize the IRS and the entire FBI and intelligence gathering apparatus. We don't need to even touch on that here today. I'm afraid that, unfortunately, the trend that we're seeing here with government is they've just politicized the ability to declare emergencies. Do you see a revocation of that power for governors, or specifically the Pennsylvania state governor? Is there a movement afoot right now to rescind whatever law was passed in the wake of Agnes, giving, that was 1972, by the way. Anytime anybody says anything happened, good, bad, or indifferent, 1972 or around then, it's because of the Agnes flood. So what do you think is coming down the pike from this? Do you think the pendulum is swing further in the other direction? Objectively, I'm talking dispassionately about this. I think that there's going to be a lot of pushback.
Yeah, no, there has been, and in those two bills that I talked about, there are provisions to ensure that the governor, if he is going to declare a disaster, that the time frame in which he can declare it is shortened, or that he has to go to the General Assembly. He may declare it on his own, but after 10 days or so, he may have to go to the General Assembly to say, "Hey, I still need these powers because of XYZ," which I think is a little bit smarter way to approach this. But frankly, we're in a situation where we can't tell what the future is going to hold. And we have a governor who has 3 disaster declarations right now. He's got the one for COVID-19. He has one for opioid usage, and there's another one to which he is saying that there's a disaster declaration. So obviously this power that was meant for good has been used for ill. And so, if you give the government an inch, they're going to take a mile. The governor can crown himself, but to give him for him to give it up seems to take an act of the General Assembly, and the will of the people overwhelmingly say, "No, give it up." So frankly, I'm a little bit more shy on government powers than you may be, because even in these disaster declarations, it seems that those things can be taken to an nth degree that was never purposed. And if you want to say that those co-equal branches of government are there to make sure that there's checks and balances, I have to say there haven't been a whole lot of checks and balances during this time, and especially if it goes to the courts, what sort of liberal or judge that is kind to Tom Wolfe going to say on this thing? So I'm very much shyer and a lot more, I don't know what you would say, not willing to give the government that much power that quickly.
And I think, Matt, one of the issues that we're seeing across the board with this is an uneducated populace. And
Yeah.
the idea that, hey, it's okay that the governor made himself the emperor of the state. It's okay that these stay-at-home orders have no basis in law and are, I mean, in my opinion, they're a direct they come in direct conflict with some of our constitutional amendments. I mean, like the Bill of Rights, and in the beginning, I can see, hey, look, we've got a problem. This is a serious virus. Nobody knew whether it was going to kill half the population or not, and I think it was smart to say, okay, let's get a beat on this. But when more and more, it's becoming more and more obvious that this thing is, I know a lot of people that have gotten this and then they're recovered in a week and a half.
Well, that's also why we as a nation, at the state level and the nation level, we have a strong executive, right? So Canada looks like they're going to invade. We give the president the power to, do whatever he needs to do with the military for 30 days.
Yeah.
If anything's going to be more than 30 days, he's got to go to Congress and, get continuing authorization, either for a War Powers Act or for a limited police incursion or whatever. So the same thing seems to be that it would be appropriate for the governor of a state. Hey, we've got an emergency. It seems like the public is behind me on this. We're going to declare an emergency for 2 weeks, 30 days, 45 days, even up to 60 days, or 30 days, and then a renewal of another 30 days is how I think California's is set up. They can set it up that way, but then they need. What frustrated me the most is not that Tom Wolfe did all this, was that there never needed to be any oversight or authorization beyond like that first 30 days.
Yeah. And to your point about the population being educated on this, I have to say the population shouldn't have to be educated on this. They have lives to live. For everybody to fully understand what's going on in the minutia of Harrisburg is not how we should be living our lives. I heard it said multiple times.
It's why we elect representatives.
Well, yeah. And frankly, I feel like the governor, as well as the president and any executive, should have so little power that it almost doesn't matter who they are, rather than so much power that it doesn't matter who they are, because they're going to end up corrupted anyway.
Yeah.
So, we as individuals in this situation now need to take on, I think, the responsibility to really push for much more limitation of powers coming on the other side of this COVID-19 issue, because remember, let's not forget, the thing that sold us on this whole lockdown was the idea to not overwhelm the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
Right.
And we never overwhelmed we never even touched.
We never came close.
Yeah. Never even came close. So yeah, we need to do a lot better job as citizens to ensure that our government has a lot less power.
We get the government we deserve. We get the leaders we deserve.
Yeah.
So,
when I was talking about educated populace, I'm not necessarily talking about educated on every little aspect of everything that's going on in Harrisburg or in DC. I'm more so talking about educated on the role of government and what it's there for, as opposed to, the government is Uncle Sam's probably the most evil, molesting uncle that anybody could ever have. I mean,
there goes our objectivity for for the day.
We were there real quick.
I was objective. I never said I was objective. I've got, and look, like an uncle that takes 30 to 50% of your income every single year for your entire life, and if you make great money, you get nothing in return. That's not a great uncle. And I'm sorry.
I got a good buddy of mine, Greg Swan. He is an atheist and an anarchist. He lives in Arizona, and he's not bitter about either of those things. So he's a really great guy to talk to. And Greg, I mean, he's more conservative than you are, then, Matt. You know what I mean? Like, he is a straight up anarchist. There should be no government. And he just asked the question simply to me one time. He said, "What are you so afraid of, Judah, that you're willing to give up 40% of your waking hours for?" And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, government does definitely take a lot from us, and I believe that we as citizens need to do a better job understanding our government and not just understanding what our union bosses say, what our churches say, what the leaders of movements say. I mean, marketing is very powerful. Here's how we got to here in America. Marketing is very powerful, and not all marketing comes in between the commercial breaks of your favorite TV show. You know what I mean? There's a lot of marketing that happens that gets the populace to believe certain things. And unfortunately, we used to be a nation before the Great Depression. Before the Great Depression, the question was, should the government play a role in XYZ? Whatever disasters going on, whatever economic problems there are, or things like that. After the Great Depression, the question has been, what role should the government play? Not should the government play a role, but what role should the government play? And so that's, I mean, unfortunately, where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't frankly agree more with you guys on that basis, because we're living our lives with to use your analogy, a person in our household that is relatively abusive. My wife is a counselor, and she kind of said, if anybody came to her to say, well, I have a friend who won't let me go outside, who dictates what I wear, who controls how much water I can use, who is keeping me in my house and saying that I can't go to church or talk to my friends, that would be an abusive relationship, and get out. And so why do we accept that kind of relationship with our government? The government is the one who has the monopoly of force, and we should treat that as we should treat fire, and keep it as small as possible and smother it out often.
Yeah, we got to wrap up because we are
out of this. One good takeaway for all of this mess that's come out of this. I don't know. I forgot to talk to my kids about civics, about like how our country was founded, and like how we came up with our Constitution and the thought behind it and all that kind of stuff. I've had some of the best conversations with my 11-year-old over the last 2 weeks about the specifics. I mean, last night we read the Bill of Rights. Like, we're going through it and talking about the history of each one of those items and why they're there and why they're important. And I'll tell you what, if we get nothing else out of it, if we get a bunch of people that are able to talk to their kids and inform them of like, look, the whole point of government is to protect your ability to do what you want. That's it. Right. And make sure that somebody else is not infringing on your right to do it, and you're not infringing on their rights. And that's the whole point.
Between Crash Course History, which is a good YouTube channel. Prager University has a lot of really great videos out there. And I know Dennis Prager is a crazy on fire libertarian. His videos are pretty non-biased. So if you're watching this and you're thinking I'm asking you to drink Kool-Aid or anything like that, Dennis Prager University gets into some pretty complex topics, and I would say the exact same thing, Josh. I've been playing a lot of that stuff for my kids. So we're going to be back here tomorrow, everybody. Matt Bellis, you're a great guest. You've got a lot to share, and I think that we are definitely going to be able to have you back on here and get more into these topics as they come up. What I like about having you on here is you can say all the things that I don't like to say. And we'll be back here at noon tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Judah Hoover, and this is my co-host, Josh Weidman. Thank you very much, Matt, for being here.
We'll have more Kool-Aid here tomorrow at noon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. Take care. See ya.
Stick around, Bellis. We're going to sign off, but